Are you getting forced to watch the UFC this weekend? Whether your boyfriend is making you watch it, or you're going to a watch party, or you're a beginner to the sport, I'm going to tell you everything you need to know about the main event and the co-main of UFC 311. And we're going to kick things off with our main event, of course. This is going to be Islam Makhachev versus Arman Tsarukyan. All right, so here's the rundown about this fight. This is going to be a lightweight fight at 155 pounds, which means they're about medium-sized. This is going to be a fight between the number one pound for pound and the number one lightweight contender. What does that mean? Okay, so the pound for pound list is essentially a ranking of the top 15 best fighters irrespective of weight class. Islam Makhachev is currently the number one pound for pound fighter in the UFC. That means that he is the best fighter in the UFC, period. The number one contender of a weight class means that under the champion, you are the next best person in the weight class. So underneath Islam here, who's our champion, Arman is going to be the next best person in the lightweight rankings. Islam first got his belt in 2022 and since then has been an incredibly dominant champion. So this is a story of a dominant champion versus a young and hungry challenger. Now, what's interesting about this fight is that they're actually running it back. This is the second time they fought each other. The first time was back in 2019. It was Arman's very first fight in the UFC, and he took it on 3 weeks' notice. Now, despite the short notice, this was actually a very, very good competitive fight, so it'll be really interesting to see how Arman fares this second time around. Islam has been absolutely dominating the lightweight weight class, so I feel like Arman is the last real challenger that's in front of him. Of course, there are people rising up through the ranks, but if Islam is able to beat Arman, he's pretty much cleared out the division. Down here at the bottom, you can see their ages and records. They have pretty similar records, but Arman is younger by about 5 years, which is a long time in fighting years. Now let's first talk about our champion Islam here. He's from Dagestan, which is a republic in Russia, and like I said, he first won the belt in 2022. He is our number one ranked pound for pound UFC fighter, the best skill-wise fighter in the UFC, and he's been in the UFC since 2015, so it's been a decade at this point. He started training martial arts at a really young age. He started Taekwondo when he was 7, and he also in 2016 won the World Sambo Championships, which is a style of grappling, so he's really good at wrestling and stuff on the ground. Now that isn't a surprise because fighters from Dagestan are usually really, really good wrestlers. However, Islam is very well-rounded as a fighter. Some other fun facts about him is that he got into a lot of street fights as a kid, which is pretty normal for the area that he grew up in. He studied physical education at university, and one of his closest friends and person who helps coach him is Khabib, which is a former UFC champion and very, very famous UFC fighter. Go ahead and bookmark that because I'm going to talk a little bit more about Khabib later on. I also included this photo of him from when he was younger because I don't know, it looked like he belonged in a boy band or One Direction or something. Moving on to our challenger, this is Arman. He's Armenian. One interesting thing about Arman is that he grew up fairly wealthy. Most fighters grow up in relative poverty or just don't have money. However, Arman is fighting because he loves it, not because he needs the money at all. Arman is our number one lightweight contender. He's very young and hungry. He works really hard, and he also is very athletic. I know, of course, that all fighters are going to be athletic to some extent, but his athleticism, I think, is a notch above most fighters. He played ice hockey for 10 years as a kid, which is super fun. He's a very strong wrestler. And like I mentioned before, his very first short notice UFC fight was against Islam. So if Arman wins on Saturday, he's going to become UFC champion by fighting and beating the guy who he fought in his very first UFC fight. Things are really coming full circle for him right now. Right now, Islam is the betting favorite to win this fight, but when it comes to the fight world, you never really know how things are going to go. Moving on to our co-main event, this is going to be a bantamweight title fight between the champion, Merab Dvalishvili, and Umar Nurmagomedov. Okay, here's the rundown. This is going to be a bantamweight fight, meaning that these boys are going to weigh in at 135 pounds. They are not that large. Merab recently won the belt in September of last year, and this is going to be his very first title defense. And I would say the lead up going up to this fight is kind of heated. Merab feels that Umar is a little bit of a nepo baby and that he kind of skipped the line. He didn't have to fight as many well-ranked people that Merab had to do in order to get a title shot. and he was just able to jump to a title shot immediately because of his family connections. At least that's what Merab is saying. I'll talk about why Umar might be classified as a Nepo baby in the next slide. So the lead up to this fight has been a little bit heated, they've been trading some insults, and Merab has felt a little pressured by the UFC to take this fight. Notably, Umar accepted this fight while still recovering from a broken arm, so he may be walking into the octagon a little bit injured. Down here, you can see their ages and records, and the most important takeaway here, I think, is that Umar is undefeated. He has no losses in the UFC, which is really difficult to achieve. At the end of the day, Merab has the belt, and Umar wants to take it from him. Now let's talk about why Merab is saying that the UFC might be giving Umar special treatment, and that he's a bit of a Nepo baby. This is all about a famous fighting family known as the Nurmagomedovs. They are from Dagestan, like I mentioned before, a republic of Russia, and this guy, Abdulmanap, was a very, very famous MMA coach. He was Khabib's father, and Khabib is one of the greatest in the sport, one of the most well-known names. Khabib's cousin is Umar, and one of Khabib's close friends that he grew up with and trained with and is still training with is Islam Makhachev. So it's all kind of staying in the family right now. All these three men train together and they support each other. And they're known to be the best in the business, so if you're a Nurmagomedov, you might get special treatment by the UFC. Khabib's father did unfortunately pass away, however, these men are still training together, supporting each other, and working together to fulfill Khabib's father's plan. Alright, let's talk about our bantamweight champion. This is Merab Dvalishvili, the Machine. He is from Georgia, and the main thing you need to know about Merab's fighting style is that he is a cardio machine. He is a relentless wrestler. He doesn't seem to get tired, ever. Like, his cardio is absolutely insane. He has the longest active win streak in the bantamweight division, and he usually wins by decision. He is also really good at Sambo, which again is a type of grappling, and he won silver in the World Championships. He's probably going to go for a lot of takedowns here. Merab is a little bit messy. He likes to trash talk. He is a smoocher. During his last fight with Sean O'Malley, during a wrestling exchange, he kissed Sean on his back, which was, I don't know, it was kind of a funny moment. I feel like he's got some like Lord of the Rings dwarf energy, but honestly, Merab seems like a fun hang. Now to wrap things up, let's talk about Umar, also known as the Young Eagle. He is a super well-rounded fighter. He's able to switch stances easily. He's good on his feet. He's good on the ground. He's super strong. He has very impressive takedown defense, which is going to be super helpful against Merab. Overall, he's just a very high-level technical fighter and seems like a really nice boy. And despite Merab being the champion and Umar being the challenger, Umar is the betting favorite to win this fight. This weekend, we're gonna see if Umar gets the bantamweight title belt or if he's going to get his very first loss in his UFC career. That wraps up our coverage for UFC 311. Let me know if you have any questions or who you think is going to win down in the comments. I want to give a special shout out to my bookie for being an incredible sponsor of this series. I always recommend to people that if they're new to the sport, the best way to get into it is to have some personal investment, like bet a couple dollars between you and your boyfriend. But if you want to take things a step further and up the stakes a little bit, my bookie is going to be the place to do it. You can use code Kennedy for a 50% bonus on a deposit up to $1,000. Also, if we're meeting for the first time, hi, my name's Kennedy. I am definitely not new to MMA or the UFC or even making this content, but I am super new to YouTube. I have some really exciting MMA projects coming up in the next few months, and I would love to have you along for the ride. I would love your support in growing this channel. If you could subscribe, like, comment, all of that good stuff, and then you can find me on these other channels as well. And we're gonna see how UFC 311 goes this coming Saturday.